Today we continue with the subject of the attitude towards women in the literature, speaking usually about men's superiority and some myths that are related to women. But today we're going on the positive side. A whole book that was dedicated to praising women and to speak about their superiority versus men. So that was written by Rabbi Gedalia ibn Yahya from Italy, with Spanish origins, as can be seen by his name. One second. Yeah. So the book. The book written by Rabbi Gedalia ibn Yahya, is it's called Ma'alat HaNashim, and I'm not sure if this book is available in print. I think it's still in manuscript. It's quoted by Avram Grossman in his book Ve'hu Yimshol Bach, and we have it here. In the scanned material, it's page 49. In the book, it's starting on page 520. Some later editors or people who saw copied the manuscript thought that the whole book is a parody, because it was hard for them to digest that a scholar, a rabbi, would come up with a theory that women are better than men. So he assumed it's a paradox, a parody. But Gedalia opened his work complaining about the negative attitude towards women, which is expressed through the argument that they are intellectually inferior. This is something that we saw in the writing of Maimonides, where he says that women are not able to study philosophy the same as men. So here he says, I'm quoting from his text, Rabim Omrim. It's in the first paragraph, the second paragraph, third line. Rabim Omrim en yeshuata lanashim b'madrigat ha'anashim. It's here. Rabim Omrim. Many people say that women cannot be redeemed. It's based on a pasuk in Tehillim. Rabim Omrim en yeshuata lo be'Elohim sela. They don't have the same kind of redemption that men have. They cannot be at the same level. Ki da'atan kala, because they are lightheaded. Ve'enan yecholot la'alot lishbot shevi. They cannot rise above and to take captives. This is based on a midrash about Moshe Rabbeinu, that in turn is based on a pasuk in Tehillim. Alita lamarom shavita shevi. You went up to heaven. You took captives. You looted, and brought with you great gifts. And the rabbis in the midrash say that this is about Moshe going up to heaven, challenging the angels and bringing down the Torah. So they say the women don't have this capacity of rising to heaven and bringing down the Torah, bringing that captured treasure. So they cannot have the loot of the precious and good quality traits. Neither do they have an intellectual advantage. And as the conclusion is, they are not able to achieve exalted levels in the world to come. And he therefore wonders, how can that be squared with the statement of the rabbis, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek le'olam haba? All of Israel have share in the world to come. Of course, one could argue, how do you know that when they say Kol Yisrael, they mean men and women? Maybe they mean men only, or they didn't even think about the women. And Gedalia goes on to say that, he says, in the past, Dimiti Ayota Nekeva נקובה מלאתי רוח אשר אין בה טעם ריח ומישוש. And now he speaks about the etymology of the word nekeva, female in Hebrew, which nakav means to be punctured. That's one meaning. That's not the real etymology of the word. I'll say what it is, but he derived it for the word lenakev, to perforate or to puncture, and he said, I thought that a female is like a torn bag or a torn sack that has nothing in it, and I spoke against them in my book called Sefer Gedalia. He has a book called Sefer Gedalia in Parashat Bereshit, the classic text where men could find arguments against women, the story of the tree of knowledge. But that book has been lost. We don't have it. Just because he brought it up, I wanted to speak about the etymology of nekeva v'zachar in Hebrew. So the word zachar is associated to memory, right? Lizkor, to remember. Whether nakav literally means to perforate, but when you juxtapose it with zachar, linkov is to be specific. Like in the Hebrew, nokev shem. To mention someone by name is linkov shem. And it's sort of like we say in English, to pin something down. So to nail it, right? So you have the right name. So in my opinion, the etymology of nekeva and zachar in Hebrew is exactly in what typifies them. The nekeva from the word nakav linkov b'shem is the knowledge of the name, the ability to know intimately what another person thinks and to be specific with their with the description of whether emotions or character traits. And zachar for the male is to remember. That means that he constantly has to remember. It's something that has to be acquired. It's not. He has to train himself to remember things about people. It's more what he lacks and not what he has. You might say I'm biased, and it's true I am. But that's my interpretation of the etymology. I think it's more positive towards women. And then, so Grossman presents the book. He says he divided his book into 3 sections, and in the first one he presented 39 biblical characters, in each one of them with their special character trait. In the original text, it was written in Italian, that as Grossman describes here, was all written in literary Italian in North Italy, with a strong Latin influence. Some say that it's not the original text of the author, but rather someone who copied the manuscript, which could suggest maybe that it was studied by non-Jews as well, that it had that influence. So what does he say here about his book? He says, "Ubarishona e'aroch lefanecha halacha lemaaseh." First, I'm going to present to you halacha lemaaseh, practical evidence. That term, halacha lemaaseh, is very important. There's in rabbinical literature, there is a concept called halacha, which is the law, and maaseh, practice. So when someone would come and say, for example, I heard from my rabbi, so and so, they will ask him, halacha or maaseh? Did he just say it, or did you see an action? Was there a deed? And if it was halacha only, they would say we might follow, we might not follow, we could challenge it. But if it was maaseh, if it was something that was done in practice, the difference would be when someone say that a certain food is kosher, did he just say it or did he eat it? If he ate it, then we know that he has such confidence in his psak that he would follow it, and then we could follow it as well. If he just said it, maybe that's something that could still be challenged. But then in between them, there's a concept called halacha lemaaseh, where the person who transmits the halacha or the author himself would say, this is halacha. I'm saying it now because we don't have a case at hand, but it's lema'aseh, meaning that I also include with my halacha a ruling that if the case takes place, you should follow the halacha, meaning it's binding and one should follow it in practice. So he says, so now that's the meaning of the term that he uses when he's about to present those illustrious women. And he says, I want to present to you halacha lema'aseh, meaning it's not just nice words. Those are women who personified those character traits in their life. Asher hirbu b'ma'alot hamidot u'ma'alot muskalot. They had both character traits and intellectual superiority. Ve'achar kach avo elecha u'berachticha, and then I will come and bless you birayot brurot kashemesh, with proofs that are clear as the sun. Ula'arotcha ki ma'alatan harbe me'od. He uses different segments of verses and rabbinical text. And some of them, as Grossman comments here, can be contested. Some of the example can be contested. But as we go through them, I think it's important to see and realize that the same exact process of exaggeration or maybe bringing proofs that are not exactly there happened with the literature that has to do with men. And the texts are like in the Unatan Tokef, it says is kahomer beyad hayotzer birtzoto marhiv or birtzoto mekatzer. It's like clay in the hand of the potter. It could make it bigger or smaller. It's up to him. So the same thing happens when we approach biblical texts or rabbinical texts. Some of them can be taken out of context to praise men over women or vice versa. What counts here is the intention of the author. We know that he's bent on showing that women are as good and even better than men. In the second part of his work, Gedaliah ibn Yahya examined the qualities and the character traits of women based on how they are described in the Bible and in society and his own experience. And in the third part, he presented the rabbinical statements that praise women. So let's go through the names. Ravital?
Did you tell us the name of the book?
It's called Ma'alat HaNashim.
Ma'alat HaNashim. And is that the book where he describes the 39 characters?
Yes. Yeah, Ma'alat HaNashim, the advantage of women, or the.
And the other question I had is, what language did he write it in?
He wrote it in Hebrew.
Thank you.
Yeah. So here are the women and their character traits. Sarah, Hasidut. So Sarah was pious. Hagar, Kni'ut. So Hagar is submissive. Then now that is in itself questionable. Do we want that? Or do we think that is a good quality trait? So maybe not. We would not translate as submissive, but rather more as flexible, being able to live with the tides. Because at the end of the day, she was able to give birth to her son and to take care of him. So that maybe is what he means. Rivka, Shmirat Masoret. And the Grossman says that for each one of them, he brings proof from the text or from the or from rabbinical literature. I assume that associating Rivka with keeping tradition is based on the midrash that says that when Yitzhak brought Rivka into Sarah's tent, he found consolation after his mother's death. And the rabbis say that there were 3 elements in Sarah's tent that went missing after her death and were restored when Rivka moved in. So, and that would be an argument to say that Rivka kept the tradition. Those elements were habracha shora be'isata, the dough or the bread was blessed. the candle was lit from Erev Shabbat to Erev Shabbat, from one week to another, and the divine providence hovered over the tent. And that is, I want to explain that because I think it's a beautiful midrash. The concept of blessing, that the dough is blessed, it doesn't mean that she would bake great quantities, but rather that no matter how much you ate, you felt satisfied. This is the concept of blessing regarding food in the Bible and also somewhat in rabbinic literature. Blessing is being satisfied with a small quantity, whereas the opposite, which is curse, is eating and never being satisfied. So that is a character trait that has nothing to do with miracles. It has to do with the attitude of the host, and I think I personally had that experience. Maybe other people had it as well, where you could be at a house as a guest, and there's really a wonderful meal, opulent presentation, but you don't feel satisfied. You don't feel that you are welcomed, and maybe you don't want to eat much, or even if you ate, you don't feel satisfied. And there could be the exact opposite, a place where there's not much food, but the atmosphere is so good and people are so welcoming that you walk out of there and you feel that you ate all that you need to eat. So this is a character trait that is associated with, in the rabbinic literature, with Sarah and Rivka. The second one, the idea of the candle that is lit for the whole week, from Friday to the next Friday. Also, if it's taken at face value, you would say, so what's the big deal? Just put more oil or buy a bigger candle. So the point is not about the size of the candle or the quantity of oil, but rather about the ability to use the light and the spiritual inspiration of Shabbat, and with that imbue the whole week. So those are two character traits that are associated with Sarah and Rivka, and because of that, you have the cloud over her tent, and that's the divine providence. In that context, I want to segue 1 second to the commentary of Nahman. I want to one second segue from here to the introduction of Nahmanides to the book of Exodus, and it's important that it is Nahmanides because we saw in his writing some negative words towards women, especially about Nida and all that. But here we see something else. So in his introduction, Nahmanides follows his theory that he presented throughout the book of Genesis, of Bereshit, that what he calls Ma'aseh Avot Siman Lebanim, B'mikrei ha'avot, that whatever happened to the forefathers, Lirmoz ulodia kol atid lavo lahem, whatever happened to the forefathers happened eventually to the children. So he explained this is in Genesis. He says Abraham, because of the famine, had to go to Egypt. His wife was kidnapped by Pharaoh. Pharaoh was plagued, and Abraham left with great possessions. Similarly, the Jews, the Israelites, went to Egypt because of the famine. They were tortured by the Egyptians. The Egyptians were plagued, and they left Egypt with great possessions. So this kind of a cycle that the children repeat the actions of the forefathers, but to a greater magnitude. So he says, here, Vinei galut enenu nishlam ad yom shuvam el mekomam ve'el ma'alat avotam yashuvu. It says the exile is not over until they go back to their place and to the original status, the original level of their forefathers. וכשיצאו ממצרים, אף על פי שיצאו מבית עבדים עדיין יחשבו גולים. When they left Egypt, though they left the house of bondage, they were still considered exiles. Why? כי היו בארץ לא להם נבוכים במדבר, because they're still wandering in the desert. וכשבאו אל הר סיני ועשו המשכן, when they came back to Mount Sinai and they built the tabernacle, what happened then? שב הקדוש ברוך הוא וישרה שכינתו ביניהם. God again put let his divine providence dwell among them. אז שבו אל מעלות אבותם, שהיה סוד אלוה עלי אהוליהם. that is when they came back, when they were able to reclaim or regain the status of their forefathers who had the divine providence hovering over their tent. And even though Ramban does not mention specifically the women here, the Eloha Ale Aholehem, the divine providence over the tent, is specifically the women, and the men are referred to here with those three words, Vehem Hem Merkava, they are the divine throne. So, what Ramban is saying here is that the tabernacle was built in order to restore the image and the level of the family dwelling, the tent of the forefathers. So the essence of Jewish life is not the synagogue, it's not the tabernacle, it's the tent, and that's where holiness dwells. And the connection is that the tabernacle, the Mishkan, is really built like a house. When you think of it, there's a table, there's the lamp, and the altar. So, and the ark, which contains the texts. So, the Mishkan is very similar, even identical to the house, and it says that the house, which is run by the woman like Sarah and Rivka, is the cause for the presence of the divine providence. So I think that's important to see that in the writing of Ramban we find that. We'll go back to the text of Gedaliah ibn Yahya. Zilpah. So Leah tzadikut. Leah is righteous. Zilpah, the maidservant of Leah, is tzenu'ah, is modest. Rachel anava. Rachel has this midah of humility. Maybe also based on the midrash that she let her sister go ahead of her. We don't know that she did it on her own, according to the text. Bilha, savlanut v'kabalat marut, the patience and obedience. Tamar, hishtadlut, that Tamar, hishtadlut meaning that we call it being proactive. She was proactive. She was able to manipulate Yudah into being with her, having a child. Serach bat Asher tiferet, glory. That is really hard to see the connection of Serach bat Asher and glory. The only thing that we know from the Tanakh about Serach bat Asher is that she is always mentioned in the censuses among the men, and that's why she intrigued the rabbis, because why would a woman be mentioned in a census, right? They only counted men always. So the few women that are mentioned are always intriguing. There are two midrashim about Serach bat Asher. She has two roles. One of them is when the brothers come back from Egypt and they want to deliver the message to Yaakov that Yosef is still alive. So they're afraid to shock him. So they found Serach bat Asher, the little girl, playing outside, and they teach her a song that is, my uncle Yosef is still alive, he's the king in Egypt, and they send her into her grandfather's tent to play with him. And as she sings the song, he says, hey, what are you singing? What is it? Come tell me the words. And that was the way to break the news to him. And because he was so happy with the way she delivered him the news, he blessed her that she will live forever, and she never died. She entered Gan Eden while still alive. That's one midrash. There's another midrash, also another story about Serach bat Asher, and that is that when the Israelites left Egypt, they had a task. The will of Yosef was, take my remnants with me and bury me in the land of Israel, in the land of Canaan. Now, the only one who remembered to do that was Moshe. And the Torah says that Moshe brought the remnants of Yosef with him, but the Midrash makes it much more dramatic. It describes Moshe as searching for the coffin of Yosef and not able to find it. And eventually, he asks around. He says, in the Israelite quarters, does anyone know where I can find the coffin of Yosef? And the same Serach bat Asher tells him, that the Egyptians sunk it in the Nile, and then he retrieves it, etc. The connection between the two stories, and we don't know whether there was a tradition about anything like that, or just the attempt of the rabbis to fill in the gaps and give a personality to that name, Serah Bat Asher. But there is a connection between the two. In both cases, she delivers a message that has to do with Yosef, who is an important figure, a king or former king of Am Yisrael, and she is the only one who has that tradition. In the first story, she delivers it as a song. So that is a deep insight regarding the role of women as the carriers of information and tradition from one generation to the next generation, especially in ancient societies where oral tradition was extremely important. Women, elders in general, but women more than men, were the carriers of tradition. They were walking libraries of knowledge about plants, about medical processes, about stories, folk tales, etc. The one, there you could Google and find a lot of material about that. But Jared Diamond writes about this in I think in either his book The World Until Yesterday, and also if you study folklore, the people who conducted research on that, Lourdes is famous for that. So that is something that is interesting when we speak about Serah Bat Asher, and her name actually was carried over. The Talmud says that she never died, and she entered alive to Gan Eden. And the Jews of Jerba, which is an island of Tunisia, have a special synagogue named after Serah Bat Asher, and there's a song about her. Ana Serah Bat Asher, Ana Ghriban Khifa Bil Khair, Dkhult Al Jannah wa Ba'di Haya. I am Serah Bat Asher. I am the protector of Jerba, the island. I entered Gan Eden while still alive. So then I think even the idea of Serah Bat Asher never died and she entered Gan Eden while alive is really highlighting the role of women as educators and as transmitters of knowledge. Yocheved symbolizes tikva, hope, and that is because she was willing to, and that is strictly from the text, for a woman to have to give birth in such difficult conditions and not let go and keep on fighting for his life, that really takes hope. I would say also determination, because in my understanding, according to my interpretation, Moshe didn't just roll into the hands of Pharaoh's daughter, but rather it was a well elaborated plan by Yocheved and Miriam. I think that they had the network of Israelite women working for Egyptian women, and their plan was they wanted Moshe. They wanted to groom Moshe to be the redeemer of Israel, and they knew that if he will grow up in slave mentality, they were going to save his life no matter what. But that if he would grow up in a slave mentality, he would not be able to be that redeemer that they wanted him to be. So they wanted to find for him an affluent, powerful household where he could grow. They asked through the vine, through that network they had, if women know of any wealthy, powerful Egyptian woman who doesn't have children, who might adopt a child. And when the answer came that Pharaoh's daughter is one of them, or maybe it was well known in the kingdom that she doesn't have children, they placed the basket in her path. It was not floating on the Nile. This is a myth, that we got through the children's songs, Dumam Shata Ala Yorarach, Teva Ktana, songs like that. But the Torah says that they put it among the reed. So it was really stuck sort of in the thicket. And they knew that Pharaoh's daughter is going to pass through there, and that's why Miriam is lurking, she's waiting. And the moment she sees that Pharaoh's daughter responds positively, she rushes out and she says, "Do you want me to get you a wet nurse?" And Pharaoh's daughter says yes, and when she brings the child's mother, Yocheved, the Pharaoh's daughter says, "Hey lichi et hana'ar hazeh, et ha'eled hazeh," take this child, but she says it in a way that could be understood in Hebrew as, "Here it is yours. Take him and bring it back to me when he's weaned." And I think that was clearly an understanding between the three women that Pharaoh's daughter knew very well that Yocheved is the mother, Miriam is the sister, and she says, "I'm with you on it. I'm willing to take this child and raise it as my own." But it was very well planned by Yocheved. Then Tzipora, Rabbi Gedalia ben Yahya describes Tzipora as someone who had haritzut. She was expeditious, and that is most probably from the story of when they traveled back to Egypt, and the angel of God threatens to kill Moshe. Tzipora takes the flint and circumcises her son, and that is her. How she is expeditious. The rabbis later on it's interesting that he says that, because the rabbis later on in the Midrash took the sting out of this whole story by saying that Tzipora did not actually circumcise her son, but rather she gave the flint to Moshe and he did that. And they do it by reading the text. It says Vatikah Tzipora. She took. They read it as Vatakah Tzipora. She made Moshe take the flint. And just a comment on that story, because it's also a strange story. I think that what happens there is, after Moshe is being told by God to go and speak to Pharaoh, Moshe goes back to Midian, and he pretends that he needs to ask permission from his father-in-law. But he stalls, he doesn't really want to go. And then Hashem says, "What are you waiting for? Go to Egypt, because the people who were trying to kill you are dead." So Moshe takes his wife and his children and the donkey, and he starts traveling, and he stays for a sleepover in a malon, in a motel or hotel, whatever it was at the time, or as in a station on his way to Egypt. And that's where Hashem confronts him and says, "I'm going to kill your first son." Meaning, why are you so calm? If your son was in danger and you were told that you have to save him, would you stall for time? Would you say, "Let me go ask for permission from my father-in-law, let me travel with my family in comfort, let me sleep over"? No, you would rush to do whatever needs to be done. And that's where Tzipora springs to action, and she does what she does. She does her big milah is to show, yes, I understand what the pain is, and we will take care of it. And so she saves Moshe, basically. Miriam, he praises Miriam uvnot Dora and the other women of her generation for shira, for singing and praising God, which we spoke about in our last session, how important is the singing, and how unfortunate it is that that concept was taken out of context in rabbinic literature to make women not sing and not be heard in public. Then he says Rahav has the character trait of emunah, of faith, and that's interesting because basically she betrayed her city to save herself, but she did that because she believed in God and she believed that the Israelites are going to win. So a little questionable there. Elisheva eshet Aharon kavod. Elisheva, the wife of Aharon, respect. Achsa hen. Achsa is the daughter of Kalev, who was able to ask her father to give her as inheritance certain portions of Israel, and that's not clear where he took it from. Devorah, the prophet, is Musar, being able to rebuke or educate, and that is both from the statement in the Nevi'im that she was a judge and she guided the people, and probably also from the way she addressed Barak. When Barak refused to go, she said, "Okay, you will go to war, but you will not be the winner." So she was able to rebuke him. And that's another example of where the rabbis in the Talmud took it in a negative way, and Rabbi Gedalia ibn Yahya takes it in a positive way. Bat Yiftah Prishut, that I think is a little exaggerated. The daughter of Yiftah is described here as someone who was an ascetic or abstinent. Now, the story of Bat Yiftah, as it described in the Tanakh, in Shoftim, Yiftah made a vow that he will sacrifice the first who comes out to greet him. He will offer as a sacrifice to God. It's obvious that Yiftah meant he had in mind a human sacrifice, because he was not speaking of anyone or anything that comes out of his doors, but rather of anyone who comes to greet him. So he had in mind a human sacrifice, which is in itself mind-boggling that a judge and a leader in Israel would have thought to do that. But his daughter came out first, and he says, "Why have you done this to me? Now what am I going to do?" And she said, "You have a vow, you have to follow." And she went to the mountains with her friends to mourn her fate. Now the rabbis argued that Yiftah never carried it out. He didn't sacrifice his daughter. He didn't kill her. And instead, when they say that they mourned the fate of the daughter of Yiftah, is that she became abstinent and she never married. She took a vow of celibacy. But this is not written in the Torah, and it's hard to attach this kind of character trait to Bat Yiftah. But as I mentioned before, he's exaggerating a little bit, but it's okay maybe if it comes to balance all the bias that we saw earlier, the bias towards men. Then Eshet Manoah, yes.
I wondered what happened in that situation if he went through with it, but I would think that the law of killing would supersede the law of any vow.
Right, of course it would, and then so the rabbis really struggled with it. That's why I said the rabbis who wanted to view the period of the judges as a period where the laws of the Torah were adhered to and were observed strictly, found it difficult to think that someone would be killed because of a vow. So they said that she was not killed, that she just never got married. They also say that Yiftah should have nullified his vow, and he should have asked the high priest who served in his time, which was according to the Midrash was Pinchas, and he didn't go out of arrogance. So each one of them said, Yiftah said, "I'm the judge, the high priest must come to me." Pinchas said, "I'm the high priest, the judge must come to me." And from that, was born a maxim in Hebrew, Ben Yiftah u Pinchas, Avda bat Yiftah. Between Yiftah and Pinchas, the daughter of Yiftah lost her life, and in another word, like falling in between the cracks. But we have another example of a vow that was almost carried out to execute a person, and that's in the beginning of the book of Shemuel, when King Saul, Shaul HaMelech, has a war against the Pelishtim, and he says, or against Amalek, and he says he made a vow that no one should eat anything until the war is won, until the battle is over, and the only one who didn't hear the vow that Shaul placed over on the people was his own son Yonatan. And as he passes through the forest, he dips the end of his staff in honey and eats it. And when Shaul finds out, he wants to put Yonatan to death. But the people intervene and redeem Yonatan. So that concept of making the ultimate sacrifice as a vow was still common in early biblical times, as much as we want to disassociate ourselves from it. And it really did not come into focus until maybe the second century before the Common Era, when the Greeks found out during the wars that the Jews don't fight back on Shabbat, because the same mentality of that the adherence to the law, the observance of the law overrides everything else, dictated that even to save your life, you don't transgress the law. And that is when the rabbis had to sit together and vote on it and decide that we must give precedence to preserving life. Otherwise, people would keep putting themselves to death for those issues. So, you're right. Thank you for that, Jenny. So, Devorah is Elokiyut, not Musar. Elokiyut is divinity. So basically, she's a prophet. She's connected to the divine. Okay.
Okay.
So we have Bat Yiftach Parishut, right? Eshet Manoah Busha. Eshet Manoah has this natural. She's timid, maybe because the way she communicated with the angel. Benot Shiloh Nedivut. That is also. I think stretching it a little bit, Benot Shiloh are the girls of Shiloh in Israel that, okay, we have to roll back. Towards the end of the book of Shoftim, there's a story about, a gruesome story called Pilegesh Bagivah, where a woman has been gang raped and murdered and basically abandoned by her master, and it will happen in the Givat Binyamin, in the city of the people of Binyamin. The Israelites wage war against them. They decimate the tribe, and they also made a vow that no one will let his daughter marry a man from the tribe of Binyamin. And then they said, but then they realized after the deed that very few people were left of the tribe of Binyamin, and that if they carry out their vow of not letting any of their daughters marry them, that tribe is going to completely disappear. So eventually they came with a solution. They said, soon we have a holiday in which Benot Shiloh, the daughters of Shiloh, are going to dance in the vineyards. So let us give the men of Binyamin an opportunity to each come and pick a bride for himself from among these girls. And that's how they restored back the tribe of Binyamin. So to say in that context that the daughters of Shiloh were generous, nobody asked them if they want to help the people of Binyamin and to become their brides. So, I mean, not as far as the Tanakh is concerned, we don't have any evidence that this was with mutual consent. So we got to Naomi Musar. Naomi is the one associated with the Musar. Maybe the way she teaches Ruth, the way it was understood in Midrash, that she taught her how to become part of the Jewish people. I think that the way this is the way I read Megillat Ruth. I understand Ruth to be, and it's more because the next person probably is Ruth Tuvlev. Ruth is generosity, Tuvlev, or a good heart. The way I understand the dynamic between Ruth and Naomi is that Ruth wanted to rehabilitate Naomi. She saw the greatness of Naomi, and she understood that Naomi sank into depression because of the tragedies that she went through. So she was able to manipulate Naomi back to life, but she pulled the strings. Everything was done from the background. She did not do it in a way that was very explicit, but rather very subtle. And Naomi always thought that she was the one who was calling the shots. And that is indeed great generosity, great tuvlev, because to give something to someone when that person knows that you gave him or her, it's great, but that person feels indebted or weak. The way Ruth did that, she always worked behind the scenes to make Naomi feel that she's important. And indeed, the transition of Naomi is from saying that she's completely empty to finally finding some kind of fullness and joy in her life. And I don't think that Ruth would have been able to do that had she not seen Naomi during her glory days. That's how I understand it, that Naomi was a great woman, and Ruth knew that, and she wouldn't let that be lost. So we have the combination of these two women, Hannah, Tefillah, and that is an important statement, and one that is definitely documented in the Tanakh. The importance of the Tefillah of Hannah is that she's the first one who prays for herself. The story of when Hannah breaks into the temple to pray, and Eli, the high priest, is sitting at the door, and he looks at her and he thinks that she's drunk because she doesn't vocalize the word. She just moving her lips. So the commentators struggle with it to try to understand why. How couldn't he realize that she was praying? So some say because people used to pray out loud and she prayed quietly, so he didn't understand what was going on. Another interpretation is, and that's really already going into the Midrashic realm, is that the high priest received this communication through the brilliance of the stones on his breastplate that had the names of the 12 tribes and the names of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov engraved on them, and the letters would light up each one at a time, and the letters that lit up were Kaf Shin Resh Hei, which could be read either as Keshera, meaning righteous woman, or Kesara, she is like Sarah, meaning that she is barren and she's praying for children. But he misunderstood the letters and jumbled them up, and instead of reading Keshera or Kesara, read Shikora, drunk or drunkard, and that's why he told her, Ad matai tishtakarin, hasiri yanech me'alaych, enough with the drinking, sober up. But that is really hard to say, to think that she was that she prayed quietly and that's why I didn't know that she was praying, or to think that the Kohen Gadol relies on reading the right order of the letters on the chest plate, and if he makes a mistake, then what are the results? In this case, it was only a misunderstanding. But imagine that the king would come and ask the high priest, as was customary back then, should we go to war or not? And the Kohen Gadol would look at the breastplate and he would see the letters Kaf, Kuf, Resh, Bet, which could be understood either as Krav, battle, or Kerav, meaning go closer, yes, go ahead and do it. Meanwhile, the original message of God was Kever, grave, saying that, it will be disastrous. So to have such an idea that the Kohen Gadol can misinterpret the message of God is really scary. And that's why I say that let's leave it in the midrashic realm of wordplay. It's definitely not true. But rather, what happens with the Eli is that up until that point, prayer was always conducted by someone else for you, or by the leader, or by a man when this prayer entails the well-being of others. So, for example, we find that Yitzhak prays for Sarah, for Rivka, that Rachel comes to Yaakov and demands children, where she actually is asking him to pray for her to have children. Moshe prays for the people, etc. Hannah is the first one who breaks with the tradition and decides to pray for herself. So she breaks into the temple. She goes in, she goes to the ark, and she starts praying. And Ali looks at her, and he doesn't understand what's going on, because never in his life had he seen someone praying for himself. That's why he doesn't get her. And he says, Ad matai tishtakarin asiri yanech me'alaych, enough with drinking and so on. And she says, no, I was praying to God. So Hannah really introduces the concept of personal prayer to us, personal and immediate prayer to us. And in the Sephardic tradition, the prayer of Hannah is read as at the beginning of the Tfilat Shacharit. After Birkot HaShahar, the first section that is read is Tfilat Hannah. Okay, so let us stop here, and we'll pick up in the next session from Michal Bat Shaul, Michal, the daughter of Shaul.